Weapons in TF2 have always been a strange case to me. On one hand, there's a general idea on how weak or strong a weapon really is. The Bizarre Bargain is better than stock in 90% of situations. The Neon Annihilator is too niche to do really well. And the Gas Passer is the Gas Passer. You get the gist. But there are a lot of weapons that tend to fall into limbo and lose their identity with the community, either because of the weapon stats themselves, or the fact no one can actually agree on what it's trying to be. Crutch weapons are such weapons, and according to Funk, 8 years ago,
when used in conjunction with each other, forms a near unpreventable shitstorm of toxic salt seasoning comparable only to the love child of Hitler and Satan himself.
Now, I sorta disagree with this description. If a crutch weapon or loadout is defined as being annoying and ass, then we may as well include every single weapon in the game, because dying is annoying as an orange. Crutch weapons are much like their namesakes, crutches. If you got a broken leg, it's easier to walk with a crutch. If you got a working leg though, it's just a hassle. Crutch weapons are similar. If you don't have the skills required, they're easier to use. But if you do, they just hold you back. Newer player benefits while experienced ones suffer. Let's take a look at some common culprits accused of being crutches for the crippled and come to a conclusion on what they really are. Easily everyone's first pick for being a crutch. Hell, its nickname with the conch is literally the crutch box. New players obviously benefit greatly from the health received on hit, which covers the cost of entry if they don't fully understand where health packs are located on a map, have no engineers or medics, or can't properly ration their rocket jumps. Meanwhile, more experienced players won't get much use out of that minuscule band-aid amount of health the black box does provide. It helps, but when you know how to rocket jump away to a medkit instantly, the 15 health on hit starts looking real small. The loss of an entire rocket is also a massive nerf to your potential damage output and mobility, making it a pricey cost. So the black box is a crutch through and through, right? Well, not quite. There are some trace instances where an experienced player like yours truly would use it, outside of needing footage. On maps with few medkits or are quite cramped, such as Dust Bowl, the health the black box provides can be a bit of a blessing. Unless someone with a brain on team goes medic, then it's sorta redundant. Still, this niche scenario does save the black box from being a total crutch. Instead being like a dose of morphine or something, it's getting there. Shocking, I know. The launcher with a bunch of minor upsides and one massive downside is a crutch. The extra rocket means if you can't aim an explosive weapon, you have an additional shot to compensate for it. The 40% extra projectile speed also massively helps if you struggle with hitting things even more, and the reduced self-damage means you'll be rocket jumping without having to worry about your health as much with the other launchers, while still having a means to actually deal damage unlike the rocket jumper. Well, sorta. You can sorta deal damage with the Liberty Launcher. That 25% damage penalty means a lot for anyone who can land their shots well and knows how to manage their jumps and health, making the Liberty Launcher the least viable rocket launcher in nearly every situation once you learn the basics of Soldier. The black box at least had a decent niche with survivability that made it relevant and viable for their choices, and I wish I could say the same for the Liberty Launcher. Sadly though, it's a complete crutch. It's at this point in time in which I remind the viewer that a crutch weapon isn't necessarily bad or good. They're weapons that boost a new player's ability to perform while hindering experienced ones. So, the removal of Air Blast, a very important and challenging skill to master, requiring good aim and timing, with the reward of 3 crits by mindlessly WM1ing or spamming the Scorch shot flares, makes the Phlog a crutch weapon, mostly. In 9 out of 10 scenarios, the Phlog is used as how I described. A new player spams flares from safety, pops oomph, rushes for crits, and then dies from a soldier shooting at him because he can't air blast back. However, there is the rare time where someone who hasn't had a prefrontal lobotomy uses this weapon, properly flanking and popping oomph from behind. Sadly though, the Phlog is still best fitted for newbies rather than the odd pro here and there. The Sydney Sleeper is in a similar boat to the Phlog in terms of it being a crutch or not. The main draw of the weapon that attracts new players is surprisingly the same thing that pushes away pros. No headshots. Instead of needing to focus on heads, you're free to sit back and body shot, securing kills easier thanks to the 25% faster charge rate the Sydney Sleeper has. It's a much more relaxed pace playing as a pro. It's okay for practice as a beginner, even though they should be using stock to warm up to the idea of getting headshots. Of course, the Sydney Sleeper is supposed to set up a more support-based sniper, shooting enemies close to majority, allowing teammates to finish them off instead of you. Ideally, you'll also shoot on fire teammates too, extinguishing them and saving them from a fiery fate. This support playstyle is what pushes the Sydney Sleeper from being a complete crutch compared to something like the Liberty Launcher, as it does have the potential to reward players for doing something different at an immense cost like the Phlog, but it just typically falls flat on its face. Does anyone even like the Razorback? The best thing someone can say about it is, I don't play sniper or spy, so it doesn't affect me. On paper, the Razorback doesn't qualify as a crutch. Both a new and experienced player alike would obviously benefit from backstab immunity. In practice, however, it's a different case. Newer players typically don't understand the deep inner workings and machinations of a spy's mind, and aren't as likely to be aware of their ass, saving them from potential backstab. Experienced players know a spy will backstab them, and be more aware of keeping an eye out for them though, rendering the overall usage of the Razorback useless. Made worse when you're forced to sacrifice any and all up-close protection such as the SMG or Girardi to actually equip it. The Razorback is overall a contender for one of the worst weapons in the game in my eyes. Sure, the gas passer isn't good to use either, but it only hurts the person using it. The Razorback screws over the user and an entire class. It's so bad that I think it just borderlines the crutch classification, dipping into the underpowered waters just a tad bit. Oh look, another weapon that's supposed to be a defensive tool against a class's counter, but barely does anything in the grander scheme. Spy is a pretty hard class to pick up and play, and being found out by a pyro is a death sentence if you don't know what to do. The Spy Skull attempts to keep players calm and cool while being attacked by an arsonist, giving them increased survivability at the expense of not having a knife for a while. Of course, once you learn the power of God and anime, getting hit by any stray flare or being unable to trick stab pyro becomes problematic, leading to more deaths than preventing them, and slowing down the speed at which you get stabs in. It's not as egregiously bad as the Razorback is, but it's got the same arguments going against it for being a crutch. Now, there are a couple of weapons in TF2 that are commonly called crutches, but just aren't. These weapons are either just good, bad, or somewhere in between. The Scorch shot is the most prevalent and prime example. A new player can spam it as much as they want down a choke point and do pretty well with it. Similarly, an experienced player can actually aim with it and get the same benefits, if not more, with a guaranteed mini crit. There's also the mini jump you can perform with the Scorch shot. Sure, it's not as powerful as the detonator is, but you know, it works. The Scorch shot may be extremely annoying to fight against, but the skill level of the user scales with the Scorch shot rather than against it, leading to just more spam, sadly. Most of the complaints regarding the crutch clause of the lock and load stem back from when it originally had a damage increase and was more of Demo's direct hit. Despite it being changed to now have fundamentally no real upside to hitting direct pills, the lock and load still frequently gets called a crutch due to its 25% faster projectile speed. Faster projectiles make it somewhat easier to hit direct pills. However, if your aim sucks already because you don't play a lot of demo, the loss of rollers is a massive downside that completely nerfs your damage output. But rollers are just bonus damage if you miss direct pills. Correct. So if you hit someone with the lock and load, you'll deal 100 damage, and if you miss, you deal 0. Conversely, with stock or the Iron Bomber, if you land a direct hit, you deal 100 damage, and if you miss, you deal around 60 damage with the roller. Overall, the lock and load is just a bad weapon, with a minor niche when it comes to sniping engineer nests. It punishes new players with poor aim with the lack of rollers, while also harming experienced ones who can aim with less damage output thanks to a smaller clip size. Although the stereotype of a gibbous-wearing sniper scoring highly damaging body shots is true with the Machina, it doesn't necessarily make it a crutch, as experienced players can still reap the rewards of increased damage and collat kills on full charges. The Machina's downside of a sniper trail and being unable to no-scope also hit harder for low-skilled players than experienced ones. The Machina is a fairly rounded out weapon that people still argue if it's a side grade, upgrade, or downgrade. Whatever it is, it certainly isn't a crutch though. I don't see how this is a crutch at all. It actively punishes players with less health and rewards them with more when properly playing Spy. Where does the crutch argument come into play? Oh. That's how. As individual items, it's hard to call the kunai and the dead ringer crutches. Both are items that require a decent level of skill to properly use. Together though, there's more of an argument. While I still wouldn't call it a direct crutch, it is extremely strong and annoying to fight against, similar to the Scorch shot, where a more experienced player will dominate serves the two equipped. Newer players will still benefit greatly from this combo too, likely being the only way they'll ever get use out of the kunai for the first 10 hours on Spy. TF2 has had weapon unlocks since 2008 with its first major content update, adding new weapons throughout the years with balance changes that buff, nerf, or massively rework them. Even now with a content dry spell that's lasted several years, the community still struggles to come to a common consensus with what a weapon actually is. Like I said before, the gas passer is easily underpowered, and some things like the gunboats are the meta. But there are still a lot of weapons that fall into the cracks of that conversation, most commonly with the coined term of crutches. I feel like I captured most, if not all, of the crutch weapons in TF2, including those that commonly get called out for being one, but aren't. Still, you might argue that a weapon is a crutch, or isn't, and I'm interested to see what people think about what weapons count and don't count.